The Australian Government, Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water, is honoured to present Australia's multilateral assessment. Before we go any further, Australia would like to acknowledge our First Nations peoples and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. First Nations people have spent over 60,000 years caring for our climate and country and continue to this day. We pay our respect to elders past, present and emerging, and extend our respect to all Indigenous peoples worldwide and here with us in this session today. By physical size, Australia is the sixth largest country, featuring diverse ecosystems and climatic zones. Extreme weather events are common and their frequency and intensity are increasing. Australia's economy is the 13th largest in the world and is highly integrated with global trade. Given our critical and abundant natural resources and skilled workforce and comparative advantage in renewable energy, Australia is well positioned to play a key role in strengthening future priority supply chains, including by building new industries allowing us to export reliable, renewable energy to the world. The government's Future Made in Australia agenda is investing $22.7 billion over the next decade to maximise the economic and industrial benefits of our transformation towards a competitive net zero economy. Over the period 2013 to 2020, Australia committed to economy-wide absolute targets to reduce national emissions to 5% below 2000 levels by 2020 under the Cancun Agreement, and to 99.5% of 1990 levels under the Kyoto Protocol, with progress towards both targets being assessed on an emissions budget basis. Under the Paris Agreement, Australia committed to reach net zero by 2050 and to reduce national emissions to 43% below 2005 levels by 2030, implemented as both a single-year point target and a multi-year emissions budget covering 2021 to 2030. These targets are enshrined in national legislation and will be met through new abatement, not the overachievement of previous targets. We're happy to share that the UNFCCC's technical review confirmed Australia's achievement of its 2020 target under the Cancun Agreement. As shown on the slide, over 2013 to 2020, Australia's cumulative net national emissions were 9% less than its emissions budget, and in point-in-time terms, Australia's net national emissions in 2020 were 9.8% below 2000 levels. Australia's net emissions peaked in 2007 and generally declined to 2020. At the sectoral level between 2013 and 2020, emissions from energy and industrial processes increased modestly, but were offset by reductions in emissions from agriculture, waste, and land use change and forestry, resulting in an overall downward trend. Australia's 2023 emissions projections show emissions under the with additional measures scenario, which includes policies currently being implemented, are projected to be 42% below 2005 levels in 2030. Placing Australia 1 percentage point away from its 2030 target. On an emissions budget basis, we're projected to meet our target with emissions 1 percentage point below the budget. These emissions reduction trends are predominantly driven by reductions in the electricity and transport sectors. Australia is developing a clear and credible pathway to achieving its legislated net zero by 2050 target and provides certainty to stakeholders. This pathway will be given by the Australian Government's Net Zero Plan and 6 sectoral decarbonisation plans, which will cover all emissions sources and all major sectors of the economy. These plans will guide investment and are being developed in close consultation with key stakeholder groups. The plan will also be informed by independent advice from the Climate Change Authority and in-house economic analyses at the sectoral and whole-of-economy scales, which will also help inform our 2035 emissions reduction target. Rapidly decarbonising Australia's energy sector will enable decarbonisation of other sectors and is fundamental to reaching net zero. Energy accounts for about 85% of net emissions, with electricity accounting for around a third of this. Australia is committed to delivering 82% renewable generation by 2030, with the latest figures showing it is now at 42%. The Australian Government is accelerating energy performance improvements through increasing electrification, energy efficiency, and demand flexibility. This will maximise value from low-emissions energy sources and bring down electricity prices. As part of our Future Made in Australia ambitions, we're also committed to building clean energy industries, including renewable hydrogen and low-carbon liquid fuel production. The safeguard mechanism is a key element of the Australian Government's pathway to our emissions reduction targets and will be critical to reduce emissions from the industry and resource sectors. The safeguard covers major emitters in the mining, gas, manufacturing and waste sectors, who account for around 30% of Australia's emissions. It places emissions limits on high-emitting facilities and declines these limits at a rate of 4.9% each year to 2030. Facilities can use Australian carbon credit units or safeguard mechanism credits for scheme compliance. The safeguard mechanism will deliver over 200 million tonnes of abatement by 2030 and is complemented by the Powering the Regions Fund, which offers $1.4 billion in grants to assist with decarbonisation and to support regional, trade-exposed and critical inputs to clean energy. Transport is Australia's third largest source of emissions and without intervention is projected to become Australia's largest emitting sector by 2030. The National Electric Vehicle Strategy aims to address these emissions by increasing EV supply and demand and establishing the resources, systems and infrastructure needed for rapid EV uptake. Critical to the strategy is the legislated New Vehicle Efficiency Standard, which will reduce emissions by over 300 million tonnes by 2050 by delivering cleaner, more cost-effective vehicles. In addition, the government's Driving the Nation Fund will expand the national rollout of EV charging and hydrogen refuelling infrastructure and investment in fleets. EV sales have grown from 3.8% of all light vehicle sales in 2022 to 9.6% in the first half of 2024. Australia's agriculture and land sector is both a source and a sink of emissions. It currently accounts for around 18% of Australia's emissions and 55% of total land use. The National Statement on Climate Change in Agriculture aims to ensure Australia continues to lead in climate-smart practices. The Australian Carbon Credit Unit Scheme also provides opportunities for business in the sector to run high-integrity abatement projects. The government is supporting foundational activities to drive greater emissions reductions in the future, including investing in research and innovation in new technologies, building the capacity of farmers and land managers to take action, and improving emissions measurement and reporting in our national inventory to unlock abatement opportunities and ensure emerging practices are recognised. Australia's buildings account for approximately 19% of total energy use and 18% of direct carbon emissions. Energy efficiency, fuel switching and demand management are all key to building decarbonisation. Effective energy rating tools for new residential buildings and new and existing commercial buildings have been fundamental to improving energy performance. Australian offices rated using the National Australian Built Environment Rating System have reduced their greenhouse gas emissions intensity by 53% over the last 14 years, one of the fastest building transformations recorded anywhere in the world. We're also partnering with the finance sector to drive uptake of energy performance measures through the Household Energy Upgrade Fund, a $1 billion investment through the Clean Energy Finance Corporation to help families cut down on bills and cut down on emissions. Equally important as mitigation action in our long-term response to climate change are adaptation actions to protect people, livelihoods and ecosystems. The Australian Government is undertaking a national climate risk assessment informed by Australia's leading scientists to develop regional understanding of climate change impacts. This will inform Australia's first National Adaptation Plan, which will establish a framework for adapting to nationally significant climate risks. The government is also supporting the establishment of a Torres Strait and Northern Peninsula Area Climate Resilience Centre, with the aim to create a coordinated regional response led by First Nations people. These actions complement other recent initiatives, including the Climate Risk and Opportunity Management Program and Commonwealth Climate Disclosure, which will improve the identification, disclosure and management of climate risks across the private and public sectors. Australia's first National Health and Climate Strategy, which sets a plan to address the health and well-being impacts of climate change, and the Disaster Ready Fund, which provides up to $1 billion over 5 years from 2023 to support projects that address the physical and social impacts of disasters caused by climate change and other natural hazards. Since the national communication was published, Australia's climate finance commitment over 2020 to 2025 has been strengthened from $2 billion to $3 billion Australian dollars. New data shows our contributions have grown from $305 million in 2019-20 to $619 million in 2022-23. The Pacific region has continued to be the primary focus of Australia's climate finance, and our support is targeted to meet the priorities of our partners there. As a recent example, safer, more reliable road transport networks are a top priority for the government of PNG. The Papua New Guinea Australia Transport Sector Support Program works with the government of PNG and multilateral partners to support local contractors to build climate-resilient roads, bridges and wharves, and secure this infrastructure from increasing climate risks. This program is a practical example of how capabilities and standards for climate-resilient infrastructure can be built locally with technical support and technology. Between 2018 and 2020, our climate finance was all delivered through grants. However, our future climate finance will mature to also leverage private finance because climate action requires more than just grants, and public finance can play a critical role in leveraging this private finance. Australia is bidding to host COP31 in partnership with the Pacific, and we want to deliver a COP that brings profile to the climate challenges in our region, accelerates global climate action, highlights the economic opportunities in the net zero transition, and raises the voices of First Nations people. We welcome this opportunity to present and look forward to answering any questions from the floor.